In today's video, we're going to be taking a look here at the upcoming pattern where we do have multiple storms to go over. We have this one in the south central states that we're going to be talking about today, as well as a big coastal storm that's had some very interesting developments. Odds of that one looking more snowy have increased. So we're going to go over that today, as well as some colder air in the east. Again, we've talked time and time again about how this is a warmer pattern over the next 10 to 15 days, but there's a couple of windows in there where there will be some colder than normal air, and that spells opportunities for potential snowfall. Let's get into things, and again, we're talking first off about this south central storm, and for the first time in what feels like weeks, I am uploading this video at a pretty normal time. So we're going to go over today, and today we do have some cooler than normal air here in the east left over, but really, if we're being honest, let's call the center of that cold air about here. This is on its way out. So this is going to kind of swing to the northeast and eventually move out. And this is going to give way to some warmer air moving into the east ahead of that. So we are going to see this take place, and we'll have more of a zonal flow, which means kind of just a straight west to east jet stream. And that's going to mean warmth for coast to coast. That's what we've been talking about for a couple of days now. Let's just move towards the overnight hours, and this is in the middle of the night tonight as we're heading into the very early morning of Thursday, December 14th here. Now, we do see some snowfall here for portions of New Mexico and Colorado, and this is going to be a pretty interesting one. Elevation is playing a big role, of course, as most Rocky Mountain snowstorms are. We have heavier snowfall in those areas, potential for heavier showers and maybe even thunderstorms here for Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas, especially the further east you are. Temperatures will be warmer and humidity will be higher, so that's going to spell more chance for thunderstorms, but really it's not looking too much like thunderstorms to me. Now, already by the time we're reaching tomorrow afternoon on Thursday the 14th, the cold is really exclusive for New England at this point. Everywhere in the southeast and the Ohio Valley and Mid-Atlantic is starting to warm up by this point, as well as, again, the northwest into the central states, as well as we do have some kind of near normal to above normal conditions out there as far as temperatures are concerned. It's a very quiet pattern, as you can see, not much storms to go over. We're mostly talking about temperatures, and we can see our jet stream doing about like this. So very zonal, like I mentioned, just straight west to east with the flow here, and that's going to spell just warmer Pacific air for the entire United States. Pretty typical and stronger El Niños for this type of a pattern to set in at times, and sure enough, we're in a strong El Nino, and we are seeing this pattern set in, so kind of expected. There's our daily emojis. It's been a while since that happened. Let's take a look here at Saturday on December 16th. We have a couple of interesting developments. First off, an area of showers moving from west to east, kind of stacked across the nation from the very southern areas near the Gulf of Mexico and our very northern borders there with Canada. We have some light to moderate showers in there, mostly or maybe even exclusively in the form of rainfall. We do have a low developing in the Gulf of Mexico here, a Miller B, or better yet, a Miller A nor'easter developing, and Miller A nor'easters head straight up the coast all the way from the Gulf. That is a Miller A, so I'm going to draw this. This is like a little lesson for you guys. Miller A right there. A Miller B would be if we had a low about right here, maybe an Alberta Clipper type storm, so one that's headed in like this. And sometimes when there's a bigger trough in the east, they kind of head on a more southern trajectory towards kind of the mid-Atlantic and even the southeast, and then from that point move up the coast. That would be a Miller B nor'easter, so you only get kind of the northern half of the east coast involved there with that type of nor'easter, whereas a Miller A nor'easter impacts the entire eastern seaboard. So you can tell that Miller A's tend to be more impactful, not only because of the amount of areas impacted here, but we see these storms get stronger because they're over warmer waters. It's not only the tropics where we see these coastal storms get impacted by water temperatures, also these nor'easters, it plays a role. And these Miller A's have more time over warmer waters, and they do tend to be the stronger systems. That's not always the case, but on average, you're going to see stronger Miller A nor'easters than Miller B's. Let's keep going with this. That's kind of just like a daily lesson for you guys. And this storm is already getting very strong. We see a 996 before it's even crossed into kind of offshore of the East Coast. It's still over the Gulf and already causing some pretty major rainfall for South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida there. By the time we're reaching Sunday the 17th, here's the afternoon hour. So at some point overnight into the morning hours, it's going to cross over Florida. And by the time we're reaching the afternoon, we can see it is on the East Coast side of things now as a 995. Now bringing major impacts to Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida there. So definitely a pretty impactful system. And I want to keep in mind this trend that's happening out west. We're seeing some warmer air build in than what we've been seeing. So we're going to do a plus for that. A little bit indicative of a positive PNA, but it's not necessarily the most obvious positive PNA. It's positive PNA-ish, but not quite all the way there. We will see some pretty impactful things because of this, though. One of which, as this cold air gets squeezed in the north here, because this warmer air is pushing northward, we see a lot of the cold air that would have been in this area trying to head eastward as it has nowhere else to go. And because there will be so much in eastern Canada, it's going to have to spread southward. And that's what we're going to see happen here as this kind of Arctic front here is going to get pushed further and further south, or the kind of Arctic jet stream there. So we'll see this happen between Sunday and Monday. Sure enough, we're seeing this begin to take place. But look at how wasteful this system is. And what I mean by that is this whole very, very strong low. It's moved onshore on this run, by the way. So we've continued to see that western trend of things. We see it over kind of western or central North Carolina and Virginia as a 985. And yes, just in case you're curious, if it is over land like this, that will make it a weaker system than if it stayed offshore as it moves over land. That's going to cause this thing to be a little bit weaker than it could have been if it stayed offshore. Keep that in mind. That's if that is what happens, by the way, because we could see some eastern trends with this as well. Look at how intense this system is, though. We have our low here, maybe somewhat of an occlusion for Maryland, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania. And what I mean by that is it's not really a cold front or a warm front. It's kind of just a mixture of the two. And then our cold front is there, warm front is somewhere up here, maybe an occlusion closer to the low, like I mentioned. And this is a very classic storm, looks very intense, and it's far stretching with those frontal boundaries, as you can see. Now, what's interesting is the cold is moving in, but it's wasteful because we've seen this massive storm, but not enough cold air to see any snowfall in any of these areas. You know it's a very warm pattern and a very crappy winter pattern if you're not seeing any blue over New York or New England or even Eastern Canada. There are a lot of areas in the green entirely. So this is a very, very not winter-like pattern. But what we see happen, because the storm tracks, I'm going to try to draw what it does. It's going to do this, and what we're going to see is it's going to try to do kind of like a loop and then head back offshore. This is kind of common. That loop seems kind of goofy and not like something that would really happen, but we actually do see this happen quite a bit with these nor'easter type storms. So don't rule it out, and that would definitely stall things out, because obviously if it takes a straight route off the coast, it's going to move out quicker. With this loop that it does, it's not that big, but let's just pretend, that's going to take more time for this whole system to move up the coast. So what we end up seeing happening as a result is that cold air has more time to move in. We do have a pretty interesting situation here with the lows. It's very similar to our previous storm where we have this northern low up here at a 996, and then we have this southern low down here with a 993. Which one of these is the primary low over time is going to dictate everything, okay? This is a very important factor, and over the coming days and weeks, we're going to be tracking things like this. But for about 5 days, we're going to be tracking this system, and we will keep you up to date with which low is looking like the stronger one over time. But as of now, this southern one is, and if this is the case and it does stall out like this, that could give this cold air enough time to move in. And sure enough, we do see that begin to happen here. As this low is over Long Island, New York City-ish area, we do see some snowfall begin here for New York, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and maybe even far western Maryland over the Appalachian Mountains. Pretty interesting situation, makes this storm a lot more wintry, and especially this is by the early morning hours of Tuesday the 19th. As we move towards the late morning here, this is maybe about 8 a.m. Eastern, we see heavier snowfall develop here for New York, Vermont, Massachusetts. Very interesting. Now, is this the most major snowstorm ever? Absolutely not. But we have absolutely nothing outside of this storm to track right now. So if this storm ends up being a 6 to 10 inch snow event for at least the areas that typically do see snow this time of year during storms, I would say that's a win, considering how warm the overall upcoming pattern is. So keep that in mind. This is very interesting, and certainly a lot more interesting than 2 model runs ago, or maybe 2 or 3 days ago, when things were looking very dire, very warm, very dry, snowless. We've seen a large increase in the probabilities of some snowfall to track here, which is interesting. You can see by Tuesday afternoon into kind of Tuesday evening here, we do have a lot of cold air around the mid-Atlantic and Northeast. That quickly moves out, though. We do see kind of unseasonably cool temperatures where the jet stream isn't flat. Clearly, this is not flat, but it's not super curvy either. We do have some characteristics of a positive P&A where this warm air is pushing well up into British Columbia, and this cold air is displaced kind of southward in the east here. Slightly below normal temperatures is probably what I would expect for a lot of these areas here in the east in this type of a pattern. Nothing crazy, probably 5 to maybe 10 degrees below your average temperatures. Keep that in mind. That is more interesting than what we've been seeing as far as the model runs are concerned. So things are looking a little bit more interesting, which should give you guys some hope. Also, another thing that we're seeing developing as we enter into the early portion of the winter here, this is by the 22nd into the 23rd, we do see this southern stream begin to come at play. So we're seeing a lot more storms move through the southwest here, like California, Arizona, New Mexico. And if you kept up with our winter forecasts and winter videos, you would note that we did call for this to begin to happen. And it looks like that's finally beginning to become a factor here in the upcoming pattern. Now, I'm going to go ahead and refresh my tab here because we have more hours on the model run that hadn't come out yet. So we're going to watch this together. I want to see what ends up happening. We don't really get much else. We do get this storm moving into the south central again, so maybe a second storm for these folks. Some snowfall for the mountainous regions of Colorado, Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico, so the 4 corner states, and some rainfall developing. But look at the jet stream. It is pretty marginal, keep in mind, but we do have some cooler air moving into the east. It doesn't look intense once again, so again, maybe 5 to 10 degrees below normal, but it is cooler temperatures, seasonable to cooler temperatures, which is, again, infinitely more interesting than what we were seeing a couple of days ago, and still the look of a positive P&A. So things are beginning to look a little bit more promising, especially as we're getting more days on the back end of these model runs. It does appear like this warm pattern could be just a 10-day warm pattern, not a full winter, not a 30-day warm pattern. It looks like it could be more of a short to medium term warm pattern, which is a positive for cold and snow lovers, to say the least, like myself. So a lot of you that were looking concerned about me saying maybe winter's going to be canceled, that was more of a thumbnail and title thing. It was more of a question I had been seeing in comments and other weather pages where people were really debating if winter should be canceled or not. It's just a term, obviously, that people use when winters don't really get going. And I wanted to kind of answer that question. So the title and thumbnail of that video were more directed towards those concerns that I've seen others have, not necessarily myself. But definitely looking like there is some hope moving forward. Let's go ahead and go through the numbers here. I mean, the precipitation, we do again see the southwest start to get going here with some above average precipitation for California, which is great news. Also, keep in mind, if we're looking at the west at a whole, we see less for the northwest, more for the southwest, which is very El Nino-like. If we're looking at the track of most of our precipitation, you're looking at something like this. Again, very, very El Nino-like. In the East Coast overall over the next 10 days, mostly due to that one major storm, is going to be really looking at some above average precipitation overall. Total snowfall here, nothing crazy like I mentioned. We do have pretty high amounts for the Sierra Nevadas with that southwest storm that moves on. We see 2 storms impact the 4 corner states, which gives us some pretty decent snowfall totals there in the 4 corner states. And then as we look at the northeast here, we're going to zoom in so we can see the more intricate details. We do again get about a dusting, if anything, there in those grays, mostly due to that single storm, as we mentioned. 2 to 6 inches in the blues, which is again from that single storm. We're seeing that as far south as the Smoky Mountains, some of these Appalachian Mountains there in West Virginia, and then for New York into portions of very far northern New England. We even see some purples mixed in there. That's going to be 6 to 10 inches. And then those pinks there for the very far northern mountainous regions of Vermont. That's going to be 10 to even 20 inches there in those pinks, more like probably 10 to 15 or so, but certainly some larger snowfall totals there. So is it a major widespread snowstorm? Not yet. I mean, it could trend in that direction, of course, but as of now, it's looking more like a decent seasonable snowstorm, which is more than we could have said a couple days ago. So I'm very happy about that. As we take a look at the temperature pattern overall, I mean, we get these colder times in the east. We're in one right now. We do see a warm up occur here, where this is much more like what I picture the 10-day pattern looking like overall. Coast to coast warmth for the most part. But even despite this overall pattern over the next 10 days, we get these quick cooldowns for the east. Here's the one that happens during that storm. So again, this, especially the darker blues and the greens, is enough to support snowstorms. And I mean, we have a coastal storm in the area as this is happening. So that obviously draws some red flags for some potential snowfall in the northeast corner of the nation. And that's what we've been talking about, and that's what we'll be watching for. That cold air does somewhat come to an end. I mean, we get this milder pattern, but look, towards the end of the model run, the 23rd, as we're approaching Christmas, we get an even deeper cold air mass over the east. And again, we're in an El Nino. We could see a coastal storm at any point, and if we start to get more activity showing up on these model runs, we could all of a sudden be talking about more activity potentially as far as snowfall in the east and around Christmas, which should get some of you excited. And again, look at the west. We have a positive PNA set up as this warm temperatures persist in the west. So things are starting to pick up and look more positive. We're going to keep you guys up to date with it. I still expect a lot of warmth this next 10-day period, mostly from the 10th to the 20th. We've been talking about that for a couple days now. So mostly the next 7 days from this point. But really, there is some cooler air in there. There is some coastal storms, and there is still potential. And no telling what happens after the 20th. So far looks cold. Could do anything. We could be talking about more cold and snow moving forward. I'm looking forward to talking about all of it with you guys. So be sure to subscribe. We do upload every single day. You can even hit the bell icon for daily notifications when we upload so you never miss one. Be sure to like the video if you did enjoy it. Leave a comment down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.